Once you've ensured you've got the correct hardware to make Windows 10 blaze when it comes to performance, it's time to make sure it stays that way. That's going to be our primary focus in this nugget. Almost as always, if you'd like to follow along with me, just jump into the hands-on lab nugget. We got one machine in there. It's our good old CBT NUG 1 client or client 1 NUG, whatever it's called. It's that machine in there just waiting for us to explore. Now, here's the deal. I cannot emphasize this enough. It's amazing how much power we get in what used to be kind of silly little things like the task manager. So if I right click the taskbar, notice it's an easy way to get to task manager. And when you first look at this, it's real old school, the task manager. This is what the task manager looked like pretty much all the way back to like Windows 3.1 days. And you can see it's not very exciting at all for us because there's no running applications at all. But if you choose more details, you're going to see that the task manager has really grown up over the years. In fact, let me maximize this so we can see it all. And notice now we're looking at the running processes. And why this is so great is those key metrics and factors that we have discussed before, like CPU and memory and disk and network and even power usage. These are displayed for us, broken down on a process by process basis. And yes, if you're wondering if it works Excel-like, it sure does. Shout out to Simona, our amazing office trainer here at CBT Nuggets, among other topics that she teaches. But anyway, so there I'm sorting by memory consumption. I can sort by CPU. This is pretty slick. If something were really misbehaving, like I have maybe a process in here like the Edge browser, I could right click and notice I could end this task. So we have the ability to kill stuff off that may be affecting our performance in here as well. Notice there's a performance tab, and the performance tab gives us a little mini performance monitor view of some of the common metrics that you would be interested in, like memory usage and disk usage and the other disk usage. We have a C drive and a U drive, and then of course how much data that we're blazing over the network connection. And it's no surprise that there's none being done right now because, as you can see, I basically have our network adapter effectively disabled by messing up the default gateway information and stuff like that so that we're not bogged down with internet connectivity in this hands-on lab. There's an app history feature so you can see what's been running and what kind of resource consumption that those applications consumed. And then this you really got to love. Here's a look at what's going to be firing off at startup. And one of the problems that, we really face with Windows 10 is so many applications like to launch at startup and run in the background. You've got like iTunes checking for updates. You've got the Windows security notification. As you can see here, you've got OneDrive, you've got Dropbox, you've got weather apps for checking the weather. You've got all this stuff that likes to fire up and run in the background in Windows. And this can really impact startup and even the performance once you're up and running. So you can right click and disable. You can see where this application that's running is located. You can access the properties of this application. So powerful options right here. And as you might guess, a frequent thing that we're doing is going in and disabling that stuff that we really don't want starting with Windows and running all the time. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that we would do this for our Windows security notifications. It's just that that's all we happen to have in this little lab machine. Keep in mind too that a lot of times this will lead me to uninstall stuff. So like I'll see that Skype is starting automatically. And if I do not want Skype, maybe it's even a violation of my security policy to have Skype on the machine. This leads me to uninstall Skype. And then of course it disappears from this list. Here's our users information. This is pretty cool. So we can see by user basis, the resource consumption. This is going to be huge if you have multiple accounts that stay logged in and you just switch back and forth. There's the details area for even more information about the processes that are running. And then how about this? Services. We know this is critical. And if you want a just real easy way to get to it, this services tab is going to do you wonders. And notice you could come in here, you could sort by the name column like we would if we were in the full-blown services app. Now I've got them backwards alphabetically, but you get the idea. We can go in and do things like pause temporarily a service that might be causing us problems, or even disable a service that we don't want running. Notice many of these are stopped already, but there's the Windows Defender antivirus service. It's running. I could just click on it here, right click, and say, I need you to stop right now. So the Task Manager, oh boy, there's a lot of tools in there, aren't there, that are going to directly impact performance. And there was even those monitoring tools that we saw where we could monitor stuff. Speaking of monitoring, one step above what we just saw is a nice little desktop app we get free of charge called the Resource Monitor. So here's a more detailed look. One step above what we saw in the Task Manager, here's a more detailed look where we can see CPU percentage. We get these cute little graphs, and you can resize this stuff, of course. And notice it focuses on CPU metrics, disk metrics, network metrics, and if we scroll down, memory metrics that are available for us in order to see really relevant information on how stuff is running. We can also switch between them, notice, by using these tabs at the top to get even more detailed information about the metric information. So if I go to the memory tab, I can see the physical memory and this pretty little chart that shows me how I'm doing from a memory perspective. For most of our users, right, when we're training them how to check their own performance, the two tools I've shown you now, Task Manager and this Resource Monitor, they're going to be enough. What you and I might end up using to do more sophisticated performance tracking and tuning is going to be the full-blown performance monitor. This is the killer utility when it comes to performance monitoring, as it is appropriately named. You can see right off the bat we're getting system summary information that's critical, but then if you go into the performance monitor itself, you can see that we have this very sophisticated interface that we can manipulate with key metric information. And notice you could even create what are called data collector sets and then save this information out to reports. And what you can do with that kind of work is take nice baselines. So I could say, all right, when I'm recording a CBT nugget on my Windows 10 machine using Camtasia from TechSmith, I can go in there and say, okay, what does that look like from a resource consumption perspective? And then if I'm having problems with the machine when recording with Camtasia, I can go in and compare what's happening when I'm having problems to the baseline, and I can identify some, root causes typically when you do that kind of work. We can see this red line here represents percent processor time. So a very important metric regarding how busy the CPU is. And we can see these little spikes are probably coordinated with, look at that, me moving the mouse. That's a virtual machine for you. This thing is not the most robust CPU environment. Now, what if you wanted to add additional metric information here? Well, no problem. You just go and click the pretty green plus sign up there, and you can go in and just see this incredible number of available counters for you. If we go into like memory, we'll see that under the memory category, there is just this incredible number of metrics that we could go in and monitor. One of the things that we may want to look at right now would be, how about how much memory roughly that we are using? That's always good. So we could say like percentage committed bytes that are in use right now. I could add this counter, say okay, and now it's in the chart. The only problem is you really can't see it all that well. So if we go down and select it here, right click it and go to properties, I'm going to change the color to something more bold. And in fact, I'll even bold the line a little bit and say, okay. So now we can see the kind of look at the percentage of committed memory, and notice we're still getting the CPU information. Now, of course, we can make sure this is working by launching the store. That's going to fail, by the way, because we don't have an internet connection. Launching OneNote. We're going to go in and we're going to launch the Microsoft Whiteboard, which I've never even heard of before. We're going to go in and launch Office Lens. You get the idea. If we skip back over here, we can see, sure enough, this is causing temporary spikes in the CPU, but I'm not in a big panic because they are temporary spikes, and we can see the usage of memory creeping on up as we launch those different applications. Again, as I said, this is a very sophisticated tool, and it can really help you create powerful baselines and then analyze performance and compare it against those baselines. So 3 different tools, everybody. Let's recap those. The really simple tool is Task Manager, and it goes beyond performance monitoring. As we saw, we would go in there to kill some offending task if we needed to. Then we had the Resource Monitor. It's a bit of that on steroids. And then if we really wanted to go crazy with steroids, I'm thinking the baseball era here, Major League Baseball in the United States, we would go to the Performance Monitor. And that's the tool you can see running in the background here. And this tool is built in to Windows 10. And in fact, we've had this in many, many different prior versions of Windows. It reminds me of the Event Viewer. It's something that does such an incredible job for us that it's been essentially unchanged for many different Windows versions. I hope this nugget was informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.